What's up guys? Welcome back to another accessibility review, this time with the highly anticipated Cyberpunk 2077. This isn't your normal review, I'm just going to be focusing specifically on accessibility. I'm not going to be commenting on any of the bugs or anything like that, so just keep that in mind when you're watching. Usually I stick to cognitive accessibility specifically because that's the area that affects me most, but there are some really big accessibility issues that need to be addressed. So I'm going to cover those very briefly. First of all, there are large numbers of disabled players not able to play this game at all because of the fixed menu controls. Yes, you can remap buttons for gameplay, but there's no way to do so for any of the menus, and you need to be able to navigate the menus to even start the game. It also doesn't detect any inputs from assistive tech like on-screen keyboards or voice commands, so if you rely on any of those solutions, Cyberpunk isn't made for you, you're probably not going to be able to play. Secondly, and I'm sure some of you may know about this already, during the brain dance segments, CDPR actually mimicked a flashing pattern of lights that neurologists use in real life to trigger seizures. And it actually caused one journalist to have a seizure. They have now patched it, which is fantastic, but the question remains how and why it was even in the game in the first place. Seizures can literally kill you, so it baffles me entirely how this was approved, but I do appreciate CDPR moving so quickly to make those segments safer for players. I think they patched it like the day after, so that's great, but also, why? Why was it in there? I'm not going to be showing any of the brain dance footage in this video. I'm pretty sure the new lighting effect they use is relatively safe, but I'm not keen on using you guys as guinea pigs, so I'm just not going to show it at all. There are also some kind of glitchy effects in the game that I'm a bit suspicious of, so please do exercise caution with this video. Maybe pop me in another tab and just listen to me if you've had seizures before. Please look after yourselves. Please use your best judgment around this stuff, as I don't want anyone to get hurt just from watching this video. When it comes to cognitive accessibility, that's stuff around memory, processing, concentration, etc. I was pleasantly surprised by Cyberpunk. Given their blatant disregard for disabled players in other areas, they actually didn't do a terrible job on the cognitive accessibility side. Which kind of makes me even more mad about the other really big accessibility issues that I mentioned before, because it's clearly something that they're aware of and they're working towards, and I guess it just kind of hurts seeing other disabled friends not being able to play it at all. But let's crack on, let's talk about the cognitive accessibility in the game. When you boot up the game, you are met with a massive range of settings. These menus are super detailed, which is great, but it also means it might take you a little while to find exactly what you're looking for. The game does have a dedicated accessibility menu with some good features, but since any feature can be an accessibility feature, I'm going to show you some useful stuff in the other menus too. The accessibility menu itself is relatively sparse, but actually has some really great stuff. The aim assists are fantastic, and there are options to help players with motion sickness, such as reducing the amount of secondary camera movements, adjusting the weapon sway, and adding a persistent crosshair. If you need to adjust the motion blur or field of view to help you with your motion sickness, you can find these in the graphics menu. I was pretty impressed by this range of settings, and I'm happy to report I haven't had any debilitating motion sickness when playing the game yet, which is always a concern when I play a first-person game. So far so good. All of the settings menus also give you a short description of what each option does, which is super helpful. There are 4 difficulty modes in Cyberpunk: easy, normal, hard, and very hard, and you're given a short description of these before you decide. Although it doesn't really give you too much detail on which mechanics they affect. They mention combat a little bit, but it's not clear whether it also affects stealth, detection, exploration. It's still a little bit unclear. The early tutorials are your standard sort of training ground environment levels, and they actually do a pretty decent job at onboarding the player, although I'm not sure if you can go back and play them at any time if you need to. This would be cool, but I haven't been able to find it yet. Please do let me know in the comments if you've been able to find this. There's quite a lot to remember in this game, as there are quite a lot of different mechanics. Similarly to Watch Dogs Legion, there's stealth, combat, hacking, driving, so I was really pleased to see they also had control reminders pop up on the bottom right of the screen to refresh my memory. Similarly to the recent Ubisoft games as well, you can customize which elements of the HUD are displayed. This is particularly useful for a game like Cyberpunk because it is a very visually noisy game. Everything is obviously very stylized and looks super cool, but that does mean there's lots of bright clashing colours and weird lighting effects and stuff like that. There are times when things can feel a bit cluttered or distracting, so having some control over what you can see is really good. Unfortunately, you can't resize any of the HUD elements though, which is a big shame as some of them are super small and can be a little bit difficult to make out. I had particular trouble with the ones in the bottom left-hand corner, so a scalable HUD would have been super nice. Speaking of tiny things, the text size in this game is minuscule. If you're not playing right up close to your screen, you might have trouble making out some of the text. The subtitles themselves actually go up to a really decent size, and you can put a background on them too, but the other in-game text is not resizable at all. This includes some of the overheard dialogue that's going on around you, which can end up being teeny tiny. The subtitles don't capture any environmental sounds or tell you where they're coming from or anything like that. They only really work for the dialogue, and you can't change the colour of the text, so hopefully the default is readable for you, or you might have a bit of trouble. I did notice that sometimes my subtitles overlapped with dialogue options when they're at the maximum size, so just keep that in mind too. The game includes some sections with timed dialogue responses, which can be tricky if you're not able to read, process and respond fast enough. So an option to switch the timer on or off, or maybe to even extend the timer, would be really useful here. You can skip lines of dialogue in the game, but when you do, it does this sort of glitchy fast forward effect that can actually be pretty uncomfortable to look at, especially if you're prone to migraines. It could also be a potential seizure trigger, so the option to turn this on or off would be great. For people with cognitive impairments, this game can easily become quite overwhelming. There's a lot going on at all times, and there's a ton of information to remember and different bits of story to process. Luckily, as an RPG, Cyberpunk has pretty extensive menus, including a journal for quest tracking that will catch you up to speed. There were some moments at the beginning of the game where I'd be talking to someone and then I'd get a text message and someone would call me, all within a few seconds of each other, and I felt myself wanting to scream a little bit. But this kind of pressure eased off a little further into the game. Some of the menus are quite complex, so it can take a little while to find everything, but they should hopefully feel familiar for keen RPG players. I also have to applaud Cyberpunk for having a clear inventory menu where you can easily see which item is best to equip by the little green or red up or down arrow. Navigation in this game is pretty good. There's a clear line to actually follow in the minimap, and the map itself has markers that tell you what they are when you hover over them. Because of the visual style of the game, the map can sometimes feel kind of overwhelming and cluttered, but there is actually a filter to help you get rid of some of those markers, which is always helpful. Finding what you're looking for in the game is helped along by being able to tap a button to highlight objects in the world that you can interact with, as well as enemies. Driving in first person is really nauseating, and I do not recommend it if you have motion sickness. You can, however, drive in third person, which I would recommend. There also doesn't seem to be an auto drive option, which is a shame as I know some players really rely on this. Overall, in terms of cognitive accessibility, CDPR actually didn't do a terrible job, which I was pleasantly surprised by because I had pretty low expectations going in. There's definitely room for improvement in terms of cognitive accessibility, but to be honest, I would rather they dedicated their time making the game playable for players with mobility needs first. I hope that you're enjoying Night City if you are playing. I've been playing on PC, so I honestly haven't had many big issues with it, and I'm really enjoying exploring the world so far. As for whether it's accessible to players with cognitive disabilities, honestly, yeah, maybe. I think so. Obviously, everyone is different, and hopefully there's enough in the settings menus to play around with and to customize your own experience so that you can play. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you're playing at the moment and what you're looking forward to playing over Christmas. I will see you guys next time. Bye.